Hi, this is Monk from Liquid Hearth, and I'm here with Managrind's Forsen and Team Doge House's Ekop. They had a pretty good series in Season 5 of Fight Nights Day 1, and I'm just going to talk a little about their matches. Now, in Game 1, it was a fairly standard, It was a fairly standard Shaman deck against sort of a board control Warlock deck. Now, my first question goes to Forsen. Most of the decks we see on ladder these days or most of the Warlock decks we see are the Murloc versions. Why did Team Managrind decide to go a less standard board control Warlock with Harvest Golems, Abusive Sergeants, and Knife Jugglers?
I played a lot. I tried both Murlocs and this one on ladder. And this one seemed to be more consistent actually, and I think it trades better with more classes than Murlocs does. Just before the day before, it was when I decided to play this deck, and it went so good on ladder, 11-12-0. But in the series, I got a really bad mulligan. I only got one Voidwalker and that's it. Usually you get at least two one drops if you go second, since you have so many. But yeah, I didn't get it. So.
Now, Ekop, I know Team Doge House wasn't expecting that kind of Warlock. When he threw down some of his first cards and no Murlocs came out, were you surprised, or were you worried at all that it was a type of deck that you might not have been prepared for?
I mean, I certainly know that this deck is forced to be reckoned with, this type of Warlock deck. I think it's right on par with the other Warlock type decks. The board control Warlock, as many people call it, is a very powerful deck that can outshine any deck potentially, but it depends always how you build it. Like the version that Forsen had, I don't really like it all that much. I think if you play some beefier minions, you can have better matchups against mid-rangey kind of decks. So this is probably where my Shaman came through better, because I wouldn't have to put up with Yetis or stuff like that. Instead, all the stuff that he put on the board I could handle easily.
Now, at one point in the game, Forsen, you had a lot of situational cards in your hand, but not many solid minions you could put on the board. So you had to resort to a rather strange but pretty good play and taking your own Abusive Sergeant. When did you think the game started to kind of go out of hand and go out of your favor?
It was actually when he got the Stoneclaw Totem, and I only had a Dark Iron Dwarf, and I had a Knife Jackal on the board and a Dark Iron Dwarf in my hand. So I had to play the Dark Iron Dwarf, and the Knife missed his 1 HP Wild Pyromancer. And also I didn't get any extra damage from the Dark Iron Dwarf buff because he had a Stoneclaw Totem anyway. So it was basically a bad Yeti for 4 mana.
So in the second game, you played yet another non-standard deck, I would say. You had things like Wild Growth, Ancient of War, Mark of the Wild. What was kind of the concept of the deck, and how was it different from your standard Druid deck?
It's a really late game based deck. The problem I had that game was kind of the same as the first game. My lowest card was a Keeper of the Grove in my starting hand. I didn't get any card draw for 2 mana, not any Wraths, not the Wild Growths, Innervates or anything like that. So that was a problem for me. I got them in the end instead. But it's actually a really cool deck if your opponent is not prepared for it, since you can do a lot of crazy combos like Sylvanas or Cairn on turn 6 into turn 7 Mark of the Wild Faceless that. So you have 2 Sylvanas 7/7 with Taunt. And also the Molten Giants, people are not prepared for it, but it's really good against aggro, because when they get you down, you can usually have a really cheap Molten Giant and then Faceless it with the Mark of the Wild, and they can get through. So, but I had a pretty bad luck, but it was still a really good game actually. I didn't do mistakes, like maybe I won, questionable though. But other than that, it was just a good game.
Yeah, that was the game where Nat Pagal stayed on the board for about 8 or 10 turns, right? Before the tournament, we kind of discussed whether we want to ban Nat Pagal, and I think you're in the camp that didn't want to ban it, correct?
Yes.
Did your opinion on that change at all after that game?
I always wanted him banned, but I just didn't want to make the decision to ban him one day before the tournament. I like to prepare more than that. But in the future, I would like to see him banned for sure.
Well, in those games, Ekop, we as a viewer, while watching the games, I thought you were crazy ahead just because you drew 4 or 5 cards ahead of him. and I thought your board position was pretty good the entire game, but it actually came down to something very close. Did you ever think you were in trouble until the very end of the game?
Well, once he played the Sarah's Awakening against my shaman, I was scared as fuck because I pretty much knew I was short on cards in my deck, so I had to beat him with the limited options that I had available. Fortunately for me, it worked out. So yeah, kind of got lucky there. But if it wasn't for the Sarah's Awakening, it wouldn't even have gotten to that situation in any way. So yeah, I mean, it was, but at least it made up for an exciting game. So.
All right. So in the final game, it was Shaman versus Shaman. You picked Shaman as the last class to face off against his Shaman. Did you think that it was perhaps weaker in the mirror?
Yeah, I think it's for sure weaker in the mirror. That's why I wanted to save it until I beat the Shaman, but then I didn't have a choice. Because my Shaman relies heavily on Bloodlust, and Lightning Storm is too good against Shaman and like for board control and stuff. So that was a really problematic matchup for me. But it would have gone better if I drew like Yetis or something solid that I could keep the board control more with. So I don't know.
Actually, going back to game 2, I have one last question for Ekop. I know in season 1, when you played against me, you had this Alakir Rockbiter combo, and you were kind of reluctant to use it. And I think that was one of the factors that contributed to you losing that game. In this game, you also had Alakir and 2 Rockbiters. Were you kind of reluctant to use that as well, just so you could finish it, or you could save that combo as a finisher and look really cool, I guess?
Well, it's definitely a flashy way to finish the game, and I think I had the option to do it because I had so many options in my hand anyway, so I might as well have saved the Alakir and the Rockbiter, but unfortunately I was forced to use a Rockbiter weapon at some point to save something important, or to handle something important. I don't remember quite what. But yeah, I mean, in the end, it didn't really matter because I just figured out I had to use the Rockbiter anyway, to stay ahead, and also I figured out that even if I play Alakir plus double Rockbiter on turn 10, it's not enough to kill him because he has plenty of health left. Therefore, I didn't go for it. Yeah.
I noticed a key overarching theme in a lot of your decks, Forsen, is that you have kind of a lot of situational cards such as Bloodlust, Mark of the Wild, and like Leroy. Not Soulfire, but like you had Power Overwhelming, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think that might have contributed to you not doing so well, especially when you fell behind in board control a lot of the games?
I think it really came down to the mulligans in the first game for sure. Like it's a really good deck, and I've tried it, and it has had great success. So it really was the mulligan in the game 1. In game 2, Mark of the Wild is pretty bad unless you have some sort of tempo, I would say, but my deck has a lot of ways to deal with stuff without using Mark of the Wild, so like, yeah.
All right, I think that's good for the interview today. I'm sure I'll see you again sometime in the next season. Before we leave, do you guys have any shout-outs or sponsor plugs that you have to say?
Shout out to Managrinds.
Right. And?
No shout out this time.
Not even to your team?
Shout out to Asian Tofu once again.
All right, you heard it here first. Asian Tofu, shout-outs. All right, this has been Monk from Liquid Hearth, and we'll see you tomorrow.